Hey there, sci-fi fans. Welcome to Dark Loops, where creative and scholarly nerds discuss HBO's award-winning series Westworld and ponder the eternal question, what does it mean to be human? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dark Loops Westworld. In this podcast, we discuss Westworld Season 3, Episode 6, Decoherence. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Jordan, cognitive psychologist, philosopher from Illinois State University. Joining me on the podcast are two Westworld-loving school psychologists, Dr. Leandra Parris and Dr. Tara Rains. Leandra and Tara, please say hi, state your affiliation, and tell us the best thing that happened to you this week.
So I'm Leandra Parris. I'm from the College of William and Mary, and the best thing that happened to me this week was I broke down and bought a very cheap desk to actually use at home. So now when I'm working, I actually have something to bear down on, and it was a beautiful day. It was a nice thunderstorm, a nice summer storm here in Virginia. I got to open the windows and light a candle and just enjoy my desk. So
very cool. How about you, Tara?
My name is Tara Rains, and I'm an assistant professor of school psychology at the University of Denver. And the best thing that happened to me this week is my 8-month-old is officially a creepy crawler, fast stander-upper. And
That's
so she went from being kind of a lump. My family's joked and called her a Sims baby because she would just stay wherever you sat her down. And she's like on the go, like overnight. So we're thrilled.
Yeah, as they get older, those problems just get further away, right? They just keep moving.
Right. I know, it's like the beginning of the end, but I'm still excited.
Exactly. Well said. So the best thing that happened to me this week was making and eating sushi rolls with my 19-year-old daughter. She's my sushi buddy. She's the only one in the family that'll eat sushi with me. And we wanted to make some sushi, and she found my father-in-law's sushi roll kit. He passed away about 9 years ago, so we were going through his sushi box, and my father-in-law was a Depression-era kid, used to eat bacon grease sandwiches. Guy could save a dime like no one I ever met. And we found in the box his shopping list, and he had a sushi book, and we opened it up, and there's a shopping list. And at the very top, it says, shopping list, take book. For me, that was just my father-in-law, always keeping lists. And so my daughter spreads the contents of the box out on the table. We take a picture of it. She sent it to my mother-in-law, and they had a very nice conversation. And then my daughter and I sat down and had probably the most civilized conversation we've ever had. It was just calm. It was adult. It was completely sincere. And I think it had everything to do with sort of making sushi using my father-in-law's sushi box. And instead of going into a sort of COVID-oriented intro like I've been doing the past couple of weeks, I thought I would just take a moment to talk about how it's amazing when we talk well about others. It actually brings out the best in us. I remember sitting around some years ago at a Thanksgiving dinner asking everybody to reflect on the best thing they remembered about Grandpa. And it was the best Thanksgiving conversation we ever had, right? Because everybody was talking about better things in other people, and it actually brought out better things in all of us. Not to be too preachy, but every once in a while, we need to remember we live in loops. These loops are memories, and if you take the time to create good ones, you get to live in them for the rest of your life, right? Okay, so enough of the cheese.
I love that. I love that. Can you close with that?
I will put it in the Dark Loops saying. So what were your initial reactions to the episode?
it was a lot.
It was so much. So many things happened. I feel like every episode is a season finale.
It is so good.
This is one of those where, like, I miss these kind of episodes where, like, you look at the timer to see how much you have left because you could have sworn that was the end of the episode. And you're like, no,
there's still more to go. It looks like when we start off, we're back in Westworld. Maeve is walking through fields of wheat with her daughter. She wakes up realizes it's a simulation. So we get heartbreak in 5 minutes, or 5 seconds rather. Then Serac comes in and disturbs her memory and says, memory isn't perfect. Even the most treasured moments fade, but not for your kind. All is recorded. You have no past because it's always present. So he's trying to get her motivated. She says she doesn't need incentives. She just needs what Dolores has. Help.
I didn't open with the heartbreak. Like I was like, okay, what's Sarah pulling now? Like I didn't think for a second that she was back or with her daughter. And then she asked for help, but I was like, okay, this is gonna get good because this is where we're gonna get all the old hosts that we thought that we had and all of the people initially.
Yeah, no, it was pretty clear that they were gonna bring more hosts back. She wakes up in Nazi world again. She walks straight to the city square. She mind controls the Nazis to drop their weapons, commands the citizens to run away, and then she gets to kick and mooch on Nazi butt.
What was the purpose of this?
I actually had the same thing. Like, I felt like, is she just putting out energy? Is she frustrated and she's taking it out on the simulation? Or like, is it one of those situations like it's never not a good time to take out Nazis? Like, I don't like,
right.
Like.
I kind of got a Matrix vibe out of it in terms of, because this is all happening in a computer somewhere, that she was just getting her touch back fighting computer simulations. And she was, like in a Matrix where he warms up and where he fights all the Mr. Smiths. But other than that, I was like, it's a cool fight scene. But I didn't, other than a warm up. In the next scene, it's a group therapy session. The therapist asks, have you been using any of the coping mechanisms we discussed? This guy says, I've been trying to tell myself God has a plan for everyone. So here's my question for you. Is this a coping technique the therapist taught him? And if so, was she trained by Rehoboam to teach the notion of God's plan as a way to get people to accept Rehoboam's plan for them?
I mean, that totally makes sense, right? The whole, the Jeremiah 29:11 approach to life, it like absolves you of any personal responsibility and makes it all external. And I think there are a lot of people who rely on that. And you tend to see that more in like substance use counseling than just general mental health counseling. So I would be curious to see what he was in for. With that being his approach, what are your thoughts, Leandra?
No, that was exactly my thought, was that, in AA and 12-step programs, there's always, not all 12-step programs, but most of them have a higher power that you're sort of leaning on or that you're calling on. And so when that happened, I was like, this is how AA or like a 12-step program would go.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it might just be a good sort of alley-oop to William's, conversation, right? So like, how else do you get him to say all the stuff he's about to say that I think is in line with what Dolores, not necessarily in line with it, but like is on the same realm of what Dolores has kind of been saying as she's, killing people. So
I have to admit, it was an alley-oop to William. I did take that sort of Rehoboam vibe off of it, right? That if we can teach people to accept an external plan, then Rehoboam's going to go down easier, and we can take over the world.
Yeah,
with people wanting us to. And then comes William, and I got to tell you, this scene was it for me. This pushed every one of my philosophical nerd buttons. So look, I'm just going to read his statement here. He says, God. Do you believe in Santa Claus too? I think humanity is a thin layer of bacteria on a ball of mud hurtling through the void. I think if there was a God, he would have given up on us long ago. He gave us a paradise and we used everything up. We dug up every ounce of energy and burned it. We consume and excrete, use and destroy. Then we sit here on a neat little pile of ashes, having squeezed anything of value out of this planet, and we ask ourselves, why are we here? You want to know what I think your purpose is? It's obvious. You're here with the rest of us to speed the entropic death of this planet, to serve the chaos. We're maggots eating on a corpse.
So I did watch this at a point in the week where that was my moment. I was like, oh man, like here we are in a pandemic, maggots eating on a corpse, you know?
Yes. No.
I don't know. I thought it was kind of a really poetic way to say, I typically say, oh, we're specks of stardust on a rock in space. Like your
Yes.
assignments don't really matter. But here I was like, we are maggots eating on a
Man.
corpse. So that was my moment for the
Was
week.
this your moment as well,
COVID.
Leandra?
No, but I can.
No.
It was close. It was very like I don't forget who. I don't know if it was Aquinas or someone who always talks about sort of the clockwork God who winds us up and then walks away. And so I really like, kind of hung in on that. Like if he was or they, she was ever there, they're not here anymore. And I don't know. I really like vibed with that because he wasn't saying that, oh, they never existed. It's regardless of what you think happened to create the universe, we're on our own now. And I think that that's a shift,
It is. And I got to say, I was stunned they had William say this because this really puts him in a position to be a different William. As I said, there are 3 points this blew my mind at, and this is my work. Point 1, the entropic nature of existence. So back in the 30s, a German physicist by the name of Schrödinger wrote a short essay called "What is Life?" And he tried to get us to look at living systems as energy transformation systems and tried to develop a thermodynamic approach to life. And when you start doing that, what you see is in order for an energy system to sustain itself, it has to take in energy, transform it, and then dissipate the byproducts that it doesn't use. But what happens then is that in taking in and transforming energy, it's actually generating entropy. It's generating disorder. And what I love about that view is that means that as living systems, as energy transformers, we are natural, what I'll call entropy engines. So there's no way we get out of existence clean. There's a paper published in 91 by Swenson and Turvey called Thermodynamic Reasons for Perception Action Cycles. And they use this idea and they argue that the emergence of life in the universe actually follows the principle of maximizing entropy. In other words, what kind of systems can develop that actually take in, transform energy more quickly and burn off available energy? And the argument was living systems. So they argue that the goal of living systems is to actually move the universe towards heat death or thermodynamic death earlier. And creating order is the fastest way to do that, which is exactly what living systems are. The reason I brought that up is because it's exactly what William was saying. We're all just parts of this heat death system. And the reason this is like, oh my God, I can't believe William said this, is because my work also talks about us as being energy transformation systems, but focuses on the order, not the entropy. So yes, we do generate disorder necessarily, but there's a ton of beauty, order that comes into the universe because we're living, because we're creating and generating order. The problem we face is that we don't see ourselves as creators and destroyers. We create these narratives for ourselves where we're good or we're bad, and we don't look at the destruction our existence necessarily creates. Okay, this is a question I'm asking you guys. William's character feels to me like he's beginning the third act of this season. The central tensions seem to be set. Dolores versus Maeve, Maeve versus Serac, Dolores versus Serac, Bernard and Stubbs versus Dolores. Most of these tensions seem to revolve around the human host binary or the order chaos binary, right? It seems like William's scientifically informed nihilism is going to destabilize all of these binaries in what we call the real world, while Maeve will do the same across both worlds. I just couldn't believe they had William say that line, and because he's going to be generating decoherence. He's going to be generating a breakdown of these coherent binaries, and how he does it, I just can't wait to see. And then him and Maeve actually aligning in a bizarre, unintentional way would for me be very cool, but I'll shut up now. You're very kind to let
What
me.
was the question? Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry.
It's about decoherence.
Is William? I mean, at the end of the episode, he says, "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the hero." And then
Yeah, I was like waiting for, because that was my moment, was when he says I'm going to be the hero, because he's deconstructed everything about his life. He found the center of the maze and realizes,
yeah,
for shit.
yeah,
And he's played the bad guy for a long time. And I think he's realized it hasn't gotten him anything. And what else do you do, right? Like, and I don't know that he could ever actually be the good guy, though. I'm a little skeptical about that.
Well, I think if you look at intent versus impact, right? Like, his intentions through all of these scenarios has been to be the good guy, with the exception of some of his behavior as the Black Hat in the park, because he was trying to find the center of the maze. And my thought is that the center of the maze was an attempt at him trying to better understand what it means to be the good guy, right?
yes.
So like when we, and we'll get to this, but when he has the flashback to his childhood where he like stomped the crap out of the kid, right? Like, it was in defense, right? It was to be the white hat beating up, but it comes across as him being the bad guy, like him doing the philanthropy stuff. Like, he still comes across as the bad guy because his wife commits suicide,
Yes.
like him killing his daughter, like he's trying to be the good guy, like getting rid of this host who's taunting him. He comes across as the bad guy because he kills his actual daughter, like,
No,
like,
yes.
He's so I think he's finally able to kind of put all those pieces together into one William.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about his later scenes, but they were stunning. We then see William chatting with his therapist. She asks about his daughter. He says she died. The therapist asks, "Do you feel guilty about it?" And he tells her, "You don't know what happened." She, in the meantime, is receiving all of these phone calls. We don't understand what they are in the moment. However, later on, we figure out she's getting her Rehoboam call. She assigns him to AR therapy, which I think would be augmented reality therapy. And he says,
I assume that that's what that is too.
Yeah. I don't need any therapy to confront the truth. I know what happened. I was confused, turned around, spent so much time playing the game, couldn't see outside of it. But I see now, it was her, my Emily. I killed her. That's why I don't belong here. What do you guys think about that statement?
Yeah, I think he's kind of going towards that insanity plea too, right? Like, I know what I did. I understand right from wrong. I know what happened, and I'm not excusing it. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like it was kind of him simultaneously taking ownership and saying, I'm not insane. I haven't lost my mind. And I think that that's a big statement considering where he's at. He's trying to make a case for, like, I am sane. And I do think it's going to be fun, particularly throughout the rest of this episode, if they keep it up for the rest of the season, kind of watching him try to convince other people that, like, he's got it. Sane, that he knows what he's doing and he's better. Yeah. After everything he's done.
I mean, look at what he had to go through to convince himself at the end of the episode, right? I mean, he's
right, exactly. So I'm looking forward to that sort of psychological drag me out of hell process that he's going to have to go through.
I have to say, I was very surprised at how they were writing this. I loved every minute of it. Then suddenly the therapist starts to cry. She's received her Rehoboam call. She'll be divorced in 2 years, it looks like. Her partner's taking the kids. She leaves the office in tears.
So before that, when she was getting all of the buzzes, I paused to see what it said on her phone. It said like 2 missed calls from her mom, 6 from her partner, 12 messages from her partner. And she was like, "Oh, my family knows not to call me at work." And I'm like, lady, like, who gets that many texts and calls and messages and isn't like, hold on a second, like, stop talking. I have to stop the session and step out. Like,
right.
What is wrong with her?
I know. You know what? She's a character in this episode that I actually could probably write like a whole paper about. Like, as a mental health provider, how she handles everything, and then, like, we'll get there, but like what comes up in her file, and like, you know what I mean? Just like everything that plays out with her is just this, like, anyway.
So should you guys have a phone code with your families? For example, my family knows call me on one phone. If I don't answer, call me on the other, and then I'll answer. So I have my cell phone and I have my office phone. And the idea is if you call one and I don't answer, I'm at work, you know why. But if it's an emergency or really important, call on the other phone, and then I'll know that I should get back to you. And I usually try to at those. You guys have a phone code?
No, my phone's usually on Do Not Disturb. So my poor family would just be ass out until I get around to my phone and can read the text.
I got you.
Yeah, same. Especially when we're in therapy, right? We're actually providing therapy. Like, we're not allowed to have our phone stuff out. So the fact that she even had hers out was...
No, that is a whole nother...
Yeah, I wouldn't have even had it. It would have been like, yeah.
No, exactly.
It wouldn't have even been near me.
Mm-mm.
Then we see William having a blood sample taken and analyzed. And when you look at the results, I have to say I freeze frame this over and over and over again to see the words that came out. The first was genetic abnormalities. Then it was unknown protein detected.
Yeah.
Then it was synthetic markers found. And then it was warning data breach, tracing data transmission, Sonora, Mexico, recipient server detected. What do you guys think all that means?
Well, it didn't make sense until we got to Charlotte.
Right.
But at first I was like, oh snap, he's a host. He's a host.
Yes, yes, that's exactly where I went. Yes. Come on, that's exactly where I went. Absolutely. And then we see him getting his implant. And I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite special effects scenes in the last 10 years. I totally, when those little screws come out and they're about, oh my God, that was just fantastic. It's like Brave New World, The Matrix, and Clockwork Orange all in one kind of
It's awful.
gruesome second there, right?
Awful. I mean, it was good, but awful.
As he's being walked to his cell, he sees the therapist hang herself. Yeah. Interestingly enough, he's the only one that sees it.
So these people got this information on their phones, and I refuse to believe that the support staff, formerly known as orderlies, intervention staff, was not checking their phones. Because I've never worked in a treatment facility where the intervention staff being on the phone was not a thing, right? And so, like, nobody's looked at their phone. Nobody knows what's going on to, like, stop this procedure or slow down. Like, this is the best run mental health facility I've ever encountered in my life.
I have the same and so, like, when he's walking by her, though, like, we have to assume, like, some time has passed because he's been taken from her office and he's had this thing put in. So I've assumed that, like, they saw theirs and they're just fine with it. But like I said earlier, like, hers that came back as, like, an opioid addiction and multiple affairs, and it predicted she's going to lose her license in 2 years. And, like if I just trying to, like, put myself in a position where, like, if I knew that this was the path that was laid out for me, that would just be, like, your partner's left. They're taking the kids, right? Do I remember that?
Like, they're taking the kids. Don't try to find
them. They're
gone.
And here's everything that you've worked for, and you're going to screw it up with this addiction. Like, it just, the whole thing was just, it's beautifully horrible, right? And so
exactly.
I thought it was interesting watching this happen through his eyes, because he's obviously very concerned. He doesn't understand why she's having these reactions because he doesn't know what's happening. So it's just really, I just really appreciate the show doing it where we're watching her come down off of this as a mental health provider, again, as someone who's supposed to be helping him. It was just a very well done sequence, I felt like.
And if she is in fact the person who taught him God's will as a coping device, well, she's got a heavy dose of God's will right there, and play all over.
Couldn't handle it.
So then we find Charlotte escorting her son home amidst a bunch of news reports and riots. She tells her estranged partner that she has to go to work. He has to watch the kid. He asks what's wrong. She says she's scared. He's very surprised by her fear. She sees that he read his profile. He says, no, I didn't read it. We don't need a computer to tell us how to live. That's our choice. Comments on that scene, because we've not seen anybody sort of have that approach to the Rehoboam phone call yet.
So it makes me feel better that he was able, because, my thing with the last one was that she didn't give choice, right? And I was really kind of put off by that. But it seems that at least some people were able to be like, nope, like I'm not going to open that, can of worms. And I realized at this point, he is the healthiest character, like the most like of everybody. He is the healthiest character, and so what happens later just rips my heart out because
what happens
hands
later?
Down, he's the healthiest person in this entire point in history on the planet, right? Like he's it. Like he's holding it down.
Yep. Charlotte arrives at work. Insight colleagues meet her on the walkway. Hitmen doubling as groundskeepers execute her colleague. Serac calls her, lets her know that he's on his way to Insight and wants to see his new acquisitions. I got to tell you now, when I'm looking at Charlotte's character at this moment, she's in a massive state of decoherence. And one thing we don't talk about, or I don't know, in my world I don't, but I'm not a therapist, and I don't know that therapists use the concept of decoherence, but in the world of complex systems, in order for a system to develop a new form of order, it has to go through a period of destabilization that's called a phase transition. So things that looked whole, things that looked figured out actually become destabilized, and the system looks less functional because it's going through this change that will lead it to be something new. So as therapists, when you're working with someone, do you see these moments of approaching destabilization, and do you see them as signs of, okay, we're getting there, or do you see them as, oh crap, this person's going backwards?
I think it depends when it happens, right? I think that there's a natural trajectory where you see things have to kind of crumble a little bit, and you have to open that wound to dig out the rot so that it can heal appropriately. But I think if someone like comes in like wide open, like step one can be to like suture them so that they can function and then get to a point where it can open naturally. So I think it just depends.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it's always for me, like if they come in unraveling, I'm a little but like if I've helped you unravel and you've had support through that process, because sometimes we put up those barriers, right, and we hold too tightly to things, and you got to let go a little bit. So I would agree with that. I think that's a good metaphor. I like that, especially for trauma work, because we're always talking about post-traumatic growth, and you're gonna like
absolutely,
so that's really good.
Well, there are data to show, for example, that if you just feed a newborn when it cries, after about 30 days, it'll stabilize into feeding times. So the idea that we have to externally force the system into a state of order, when in fact it's just a destabilized system that's working over time into a larger state of order, and it'll settle in that order on its own. Or kids who are potty training, right? Suddenly they'll regress. And we're like, what the hell? What we trained you on this?
And COVID is what's happening with that. That's close to home right now, Scott.
No, okay. What I'm saying is actually, if we could, there are some skills in which decoherence is actually a sign of emerging growth, right? The destabilization before the system can be, in the potty training case, and controlling yourself as opposed to not, right? And that's a huge neurological achievement. I absolutely love this scene with Charlotte in the car, talking to Dolores and deciding which way she's going to go. And the dialogue is so good here. Charlotte says, "You're not the one risking your life, and it's not just me in danger. Serac will come after my family." I just love that one sentence, because Dolores now the Doris side of Charlotte is identifying with this as her family. And that move towards being Charlotte in that life, that's destabilizing for the whole, no, I'm supposed to be Dolores working for Dolores or whatever. So I think
it speaks
Go ahead.
It speaks to the strength of Charlotte, right? Like the fact that Charlotte was able to push through and combine those personalities to the point where the Dolores piece felt like the family belonged to her in a way that it didn't belong to Charlotte.
Right. So that's an interesting question I'm going to ask, because we're watching that character, I'm always asking, is that Charlotte? Is that Dolores? Right. And the Dolores that's in there is the cornflower blue Dolores, right? It's not the out in the world kicking ass Dolores. So when you have that cornflower blue Dolores who's programmed to be kind and get people to love her, as we'll talk about later, um, it provides a wonderful dynamic that plays out even more in the dialogue when she says, Serac will come after my family. While she's saying this, she's totally focused, right? She's sitting up straight. She's totally focused. And she's doing all she can in that moment to be solid, whatever that character is, pro-family. And then Dolores just smacks her in the face and says, they're not your family. Just going the complete opposite way. And what you see happen is Charlotte lets the air out of her lungs and she kind of hangs her head in defeat. And you sort of see her head sort of going back and forth as she's, I would argue, oscillating between what am I going to do here? Am I going to go this way? Am I going to go this way? And you can see all of that in her body language. She then raises her head, once more focused, and moves into a new I am Dolores state, lamenting her emotions. Then as she's trying to get herself back into, I'm going to be on Team Dolores here, she's making all these eye movements, she's making all these sniffs. And these are all stabilizing things that help her stay in that mode. In other words, she's really struggling right now between these two modes. And I just love how the actress portrayed the way we often use our bodies to help us stay stable in a particular decision. I suspect you both have had an experience of being in a confrontational situation at some point, and you have to stand your ground. And the metaphor is not a metaphor, it's real. You stand up straight, you project yourself into the space, and you nervously say, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what we're going to do. So the body itself is used as a way to create coherence in the situation. I was stunned at how well that was done.
She's a great actress. And I think one of the things that I was thinking about in that moment too is that Dolores, as you said, like the cornflower blue Dolores is very attached to her dad. Like she's a daddy's girl. Like she's very family oriented. So I don't think it's a huge stretch that side of her would come out when dealing with a child who needs her. Right. And so I think you're right. In this moment, we're sort of seeing those two sides battle it out a little bit, which I think I was glad to see. I'm just kind of glad because I feel like Dolores is actually a very complicated character who has lots of depths and lots of side. And we're only seeing one side of Dolores right now, like the main, I guess, prime Dolores, if that's what you want to call her. But there's a lot more going on underneath there. And I think Charloris.
Oh, that's a meme.
That other side of her, right? Like, I think that's just showing that, like, that side of her is still there. And it'll be interesting to see if it comes back out for prime Dolores later. But I don't know.
Well, and I think also the last living Charlotte was, like, if you think about the Charlotte that recorded that message for her son, right? Yeah. So it was in there.
Yes.
Like, that's the Charlotte that was pulled forward, So it was in there.
I also love how all these different Dolores hybrids are all turning out differently. So last week, Conley, the Sean Connery lookalike, who was a Dolores hybrid, he was a Dolores hybrid. I think he had, he went totally Team Dolores and blew everybody up and sacrificed himself in the name of Dolores's cause. And go ahead.
But that's who he was as Connells. Like, that's who he was as a security officer, right? So it's almost like she takes whoever the core essence is, and that's the Dolores that's matching up with the person. What
I like about what's happening with this, what'd you say, Charloris? Is that what you said, Charloris? Let's stick with that. That's awesome. The experiences that Charloris is having once the hybrids let out into the wild world are having an impact on the weights of the two different personalities. And I like that idea that once you put it out into the quote unquote real world, or what I would call the wild world, you can't predict where it's going to go, regardless of what Serac says. It's open. It's wild. Dolores says, if we changed ourselves just to survive, would it matter if we did? And Charlotte says, I'm already changed. I can feel myself slipping away from you, from us. And Dolores comes back with another full-on, you're still mine. There's a long pause, and then she says, and I'm yours. Play your part, and we'll build our new world together. So I'm getting the same vibe here that I got when we talked about Dolores engaging in self-care in the hotel room a few episodes ago. She needs to keep this Charloris in a place, doing a particular job, and coming back with all these very heavy comments like, they're not your family. You're still mine. These are intense, high amplitude statements that really rock Charloris and the state she's going through. So then we're back to William in his straitjacket chair. Dr. Alpert walks in. He says he'll be overseeing William's AR treatment. He turns on the goggles, and then William sees a roughly 10-year-old boy walk into the room and remove his security straps. Now William is back in his childhood home, looks all around the bedroom and sees himself reading Sir Rowan and the Lady of Sulan, or Sulan. I looked it up. There's no such book. What I read was that it did make reference to book 6 of a 6-book series. It's like, okay, that's too deep a rabbit hole to go to. So I stopped there. But my heart went out to that little kid sitting in his room reading a book with his parents yelling in the background. William wakes up in the white room. He's screaming to get out, right? He let me out of here, let me out of here. And they come in and they try to put something in his mouth, and he bites the assistant's finger. And they force him to take a tranquilizer.
I love that he bit him. I just feel like William is like, this is a mess. I don't belong here. Y'all are crazy. Obviously something's up. This girl is killing herself. I'm outsy. Like,
yeah.
And I will say, like, the way they did the scene with him, like his younger self, I was a little worried where they were setting it up as though they were going to try to excuse his behavior.
Right.
In some way, but then the twist it was a good twist, I felt like. You know what I mean?
Well done.
Right.
Well done.
I have to admit, I attended an amazing talk today given by the Dean of Arts and Sciences here at ISU. She's a social worker who's done research on therapy with perpetrators of interpersonal violence, domestic violence, and they're men, and trying to get them to get to the point where they take responsibility for their action requires them to use their empathy to first empathize with the victim of their violence. And but she made this very interesting distinction between moving to a moment of shame versus a moment of guilt. And she said, if they move into a moment of shame, what that does is kick in defense mechanisms, and then they leave full of all kinds of anxiety, and actually makes it worse when they get home. But if you can get them to experience a moment of guilt, then what they're doing is feeling bad about their own personal actions. Whereas shame is feeling bad because everybody sees you and you think that they think poorly of you. And I saw that talk, and then I watched this episode for the second time, and it's like, what is it? All these people talking on the internet or something? And I don't know these things, but it was just, you see his parents yelling, and he's, oh yeah, like you said, they're going down that road. They're going to justify everything. But the way they handle it later, I think, is actually, I'm not going to say good or wise or appropriate, but terribly interesting. Then we see Maeve completing her martial arts workout in Nazi world. Sizemore invites her for a drink in a basement. Reminded me of Brad Pitt from Inglourious Basterds. Tell me, Brad? No?
Yes.
Okay. You played around in the basement? Oh my God. And it looked just like the basement from Inglourious Basterds. Lee's surprised to see her. I thought that was kind of touching. What are you doing here? And she says, I'm waiting for my body to be reprinted by a man who made me an indecent proposal. Suddenly a wave moves through. What's that?
Well, she's like, not the kind I'm used to.
Yeah, exactly. A wave of activity, of light of something moves through the room, and Maeve says, we've been moved. She seems to be seeing into the same host input, the same host facility we saw her attempt to escape from a few episodes ago, if that makes sense. And she recognizes she'll soon have help in the form of accomplices. Comments?
I was just kind of like, oh, like he's gonna give her what she wanted. Like, all right, like
Yeah.
I think I was getting excited for a showdown at this point.
And they just build it up over the course of the episode. I'm so stoked about where they're going with all this. They put all these people in these spaces that, yeah, okay, we kind of saw Dolores versus Maeve coming, but where William is going to play in all this, what's he going to do is, for me, pretty stunning, particularly given the things he's going through this episode. So then we're back at Insight. Serac lands. He wants to see the assets from the park. The rest can be destroyed. Serac wants all the employees tested for deviations from Rehoboam's predictions in order to find out who the inside host mole is. Charlotte finds a console and she downloads. Looks like she's downloading Westworld Delo specs. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I didn't pay that much attention. I didn't see it that closely.
I
There
did, and
are times where like, I just don't look that closely because I just assume that we'll find out later, and I kind of want to be surprised.
I got you.
There are some times where like I will like pause the screen and back up. Like I wanted to see what that therapist found out in her file. But
yes.
This is one of the ones where I was like, you know what? Like I'm not going to try to like dig into that. Like I'm just going to let them tell me.
Right. And then from here, a guy walks in, sees her downloading stuff and says, hey, Serac said we were supposed to get rid of it. And she says, he'll thank me later. He says, that's not true. I'm going to go tell him. He walks away. She goes full on Team Dolores, kills him, hides the body. And then she completes her download. Then we're back to William. Guy comes to him from a group session. He takes him into the group therapy session. And what we see is the battle of the five Williams, right? And I'm just going to let you two take me through this scene. What were the things that stuck out to you? Because I had one moment that just blew my mind. But this is such a great scene. What stuck out to you guys?
I mean, so much. Like, well, first of all, seeing young William back, like older William. I mean, there's like kid William, and then there's like young William, and I missed him.
Yes.
I didn't realize how much like I missed him, and I was like, oh, like what does he have to say to the complete douche sitting across from him? And then he ends up like kind of being like, well, you would have fallen in love with her too, like she's designed to do. Like I'm just doing and I'm like, oh man, God. Like he just
that exchange
didn't quite hold himself as accountable as I expected him to. So maybe this, I don't know what I was expecting, but this whole scene, like just the different versions of him sitting around and sort of this continuum from this like innocent child who's maybe not so innocent, but very like protect the innocent, right? Like protect as Tara said, like I'm going to stand up for people. Like I'm trying to do this on behalf of other people, all the way to the continuum of where he is now. I wish I could do that in therapy. Like I wish I could bring in all of those different aspects of who I am in my past and what I've done and where I've been to integrate them. And that was the first thing I said, is like, he's going to have to integrate all of this to come out of and that's kind of what we do in therapy, is we try to make you accept where you've been and where you've been at, and sort of how you're going to move towards a new normal, if it's possible, depending on like the trauma. And so it was I just thought beautifully done. And the actors, you know, they're amazing. Obviously he's a great actor. I can't remember the other guy's name, but he's really good too. And they all sat the same way. It was just very cool.
The attention to detail in this scene I thought was really good, because you see the mannerisms kind of go throughout the lifespan, which I thought was fantastic. And then the way that he decides to integrate was fantastic, right? It's like, I'm going to beat the crap out of every old me that's like plaguing me, and I'm going to be in the present, and I'm going to own the moment that's here right now.
Yes.
Right? Like I'm going to essentially like dump the excuses and acknowledge that this is where I am as a maggot eating a carcass.
Exactly.
On a ball of mud hurling through the void.
Exactly.
And there was, this is one of those rare moments in Westworld where there was actually some comedy, right? I mean, really good comedy. So the very first line any of them say is the young William saying, seriously? This is what happened to me. It's just good comedy. And then there's a little bitty exchange that I just had to quote. White Hat William says, we had nothing to do with what happened to you. talking about the older William.
Mm-hmm.
And the man in black says, you fell in love with the host. And White Hat William says, that wasn't my fault. That host was designed for me to fall in love with her or anyone else who picked up that damn can. The park is just a game. You can't blame me for playing it. So he's doing all the same things that older William does in terms of, justifying and compartmentalizing responsibility. And then Delos says, well, there were ways of playing it, ones that were a wee bit lighter on the blood and violence. Just good comedy that we get to, there's never or rarely any comedy in this show. And then William just says, shut up. And then Delos says, William, please don't interrupt. It's not all about you, I just thought that was really well done. Then we're back at Westworld. They find Hector. This is one of the ones Serac wanted. So when Serac called for the 3 units, Hector's unit must have been one of them. Then Ettore, I'm just going to call him Hector because he's Hector to me, walks into a basement. Maeve says, if I can see you there, I can restore you here. And
how is she seeing through? But I mean, I know it's just what she's doing, but I just thought that piece for me was
right.
I mean, a stretch.
No, it was. I did get stuck, and I'm thinking, well, now wait a minute. Maybe we got to go back to the Winterline episode where she went through that loop over and over and over, and then at the moment, I don't remember exactly how she saw through being in a simulation. I think there were those 3 steps she went through. Where
she's hacked the system. Like her, she's not a physical body at this point. Like she's a bunch of data plugged into a bunch of other data, and she's hacked. Like it's supposed to be a 1-way channel, and she's made it a 2-way channel. So she's able to hack the system she's plugged into.
Yeah, you got to go into Matrix watching mode, right? Because in the Matrix, when they're doing all the kung fu fighting, you got to think, know what this is fighting computer code and all that sort of stuff.
I was thinking more like Tron, but I'm glad that like someone else is being a little bit more.
No. She says she can restore him. He seems restored, and we see an amazing kiss. They leave. Sizemore follows them. And then we're back at Insight. Charlotte's uploading data. She looks like she's uploading it to Sonora, Mexico. We see a picture of William. The screen says genetic tag activated. So is he a host being activated on Dolores's behalf by Charlotte? I mean, the 4 steps of Kevin Bacon we got to do here to figure out what's going on.
I don't think he's a host. I think they implanted him with some kind of chip. That was my takeaway from that scene.
Where she like stuck him in the neck or whatever, and we assumed that she was taking blood, but she could have just been inserting something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so like a Marcus should always be able to find him. Like I don't like what have you, but I genuinely don't think he's a host. It doesn't mean you didn't do something to him to make it seem like he is to get him in trouble or something. I don't know.
Right.
But
so earlier then when he had that blood test done and they found genetic anomalies and
she put the thing in it.
And that all explains itself at that point. Okay. So
and I also love that she's using him to upload the data to. Like it's just, to me, it's like diabolical and brilliant that she's like, you know what, I'm going to store this data in this mental hospital where Serac won't get it and won't think to get it, and just know that at least one of me is going to survive to get this out of him.
Yes.
So that we can.
Yeah, I guess he's my enemy, right? From Dolores, like everyone's going to assume the man in black is her. Like she would never trust him with any of that, which technically she doesn't, because he doesn't know that she's done it, right?
Right.
But you're right, Tara. I didn't even think about that. Like she's hidden this in the perfect spot.
So he's kind of like Johnny Mnemonic. I don't know if you guys saw that movie in the 80s. Keanu Reeves plays a data courier, and absolutely he has a chip they download stuff into. So you're saying that William is an unwitting courier, right? This data has been uploaded into his system and he doesn't know it's there. It's fantastic. Then we see the lab where 4 host bodies are being printed. We see that Maeve is 78% printed, and then Charlotte's saying the tracker in his blood played off, but we have a problem. They've recovered Connell's pearl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about why that's a problem for Dolores.
Well, you know, the encryption key is inside Dolores, right? So
Yeah.
is part of the did she take, she's so cunning, right? Did she take part of the encryption
Mm.
key and put a piece in each of the pearls, was my thought?
Mm.
Or was having access to that pearl going to give them access to the data that, or is the whole encryption
Right.
key in each of the pearls?
Right.
So I just knew that she was going to have to get that pearl back.
Yeah, or just even as simple as like knowing the plan. I'm like knowing,
Mm.
because I do think we see the danger of having the pearl because Maeve gets out a lot. Like she gets a lot of understanding of what's going down by talking to Connolly, Dolores,
Mm.
whoever. So yeah, I think I'm interested to see, because I didn't even think that when you see the pearl and it's all beat up, I'm like, whatever. And then later I'm like, oh no, like, that's actually really valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Then we,
good for them for getting it out, by the way.
yeah, exactly.
Good for them.
Then we see Maeve, Hector, and Lee walk into the basement. Again, they're still in simulation space, but it's the basement we've come back to many times. And they find Dolores sitting there. Hector says, oh, she's dangerous. And Maeve says, here, I'm in control. So I think that gets back to the idea that this is a simulation space. She controls it. At the same time, Serac is able to manipulate how she's in there. But she does have more control than any of the other agents we see. And then there's an argument between Maeve and Dolores. Any comments on that conversation between the two of them? I mean, it looks like Dolores actually sort of persuades Maeve in this case, because Dolores says, even if I told you that I wouldn't harm your daughter, you wouldn't trust me, would you? And Maeve says, no, I don't think I could do that. So you have this really nice power moment where these two people know that they're quote unquote enemies. They're not enemies emotionally. They're enemies from a goal-oriented perspective. They just have competing goals, and they both are extremely powerful, and they both know that. So it doesn't become petty. It just stays on top of the goal-oriented nature of their conflict. I thought it was pretty stunning.
I love that they had two women having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It did
Yes.
not become a cat fight, did not become a
Yes.
power struggle. It's we are both in a situation that we don't want to be in. You're worried about your daughter. I want, the world to change. That
Yes.
doesn't have to be incompatible. And I love Maeve. Like, she's my favorite. And I really appreciate Dolores's remark about, says the woman who can control us with her mind. Like, giving her a little reality check. Like, you're not a martyr and you're not without fault. And, like, you're not.
Don't be a victim here.
Right. Like, recognize where
Yes.
you're at. And so, like, you're working with someone who would have all of us wiped off the face of the earth. Like, I understand. Like, I think Dolores's character would understand how Maeve ended up where she is, but also is kind of like, all right, well, that just puts us where we are. And I just really appreciate them doing that, because too often when we watch shows, particularly sci-fi, whenever
Right.
you have two strong female characters in the room together, they're either having sex or they're having a cat fight.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I just thought it was really nice to have them come to that understanding and that respect, while also being able to recognize, like, we don't have compatible outcomes.
Yes. It's just
It was so civil. It was so
power.
civil.
Yes. Then we're back to the five Williams. The kid's arguing about only having his books when he was younger. And the Delos character says, oh, the much vaunted tale of childhood woe. So he's sort of tapping into the issue Leandra raised earlier about, okay, in the string of abuse, when does victimhood stop, right? When do we move from victimhood to guilt, to acknowledgement? Let's go back to your childhood to see if you were all books and bookstraps. And then you see that argument with his father where his father's mad at him, and you think his father's going to be mad at him for different reasons. And like Tara mentioned earlier, he's mad at him because he broke a kid's arm and punched out 3 teeth.
Yeah.
But he did it because he was defending his dad. So
it makes it very complicated, because it's like, you're not going to enjoy a dad who's drunk, right? But you can also tell that the dad is genuinely like, what is wrong with you that you didn't stop at the first punch? Like, you knocked his teeth out, and like, you lost control. And that, I think there's a level of sort of violence that now we understand has always been there. And he's been trying to cover it up. And, like the Black Hat William says, like, I exist so that, super fancy William can be who he needs to be in the real world. And so,
yes.
like, I like that dichotomy. And I will say, I was starting to get like nervous, because one of the things that we do whenever particularly white men engage in violence is we look back and we're like, oh, well, they were abused and all these things happen.
Yes.
And, you know, it's mental health. And I really think that we have to start holding people accountable. Like, you can't, like, there are so many victims of childhood abuse who do not become a school shooter or a violent person or a domestic abuser or a child abuser. Like, to sort of say like this sort of justifies it. Like, you don't need to have that. Just like you don't need a hero to have tragedy in order to be a good person. So it was just a very interesting way of not making me quite so nervous about the road, because it showed that like, no, he's always had a violent tendency.
Yes.
And that was really, I think, important for us to see.
That core drive piece, right? Like that core drive has always been who he is. And we love to think white hat. And I even said it earlier in the podcast, you know, like he's going to be this white hat guy again. He's doing it for good reason. But we like to think that, oh, white hat William just turned to black hat William because, and I hate, by the way, I hate those.
Yes.
The color dichotomy of it, right?
Yes.
But we see this change and we think it's, like you said, Leandra, because of circumstances, but this has been his core drive since his childhood, right? This extreme violence.
I think it's fueled by his penchant for binaries, and it's either black or white, no pun intended, and swinging from one extreme to the other. We've been talking about his character swinging between extremes, and we all had to go to great lengths to believe he would have become the Man in Black, right? Just that switch from white hat William to the Man in Black, to all of us, seemed kind of a stretch. And I don't think they've done a poor job of trying to psychologize it here. This love-hate relationship he has with his father, I mean, it's not a love-hate with his father, but love-hate with his life.
Yeah, right? So really, like...
And his dad's rejection in that moment, that's just beautifully dark lived life that some people go through. And again, I'm not trying to say it releases anyone of any responsibility or guilt, but I have to say I was impressed by the writing. Wasn't what you would usually expect. As soon as the father started yelling, you expected the father to be wrong, right? You just assumed that yelling fathers are wrong.
Absolutely.
And then he stands up for himself and says, but wait a minute, he was saying you were a drunk. And then you're thinking, what the hell, Dad? He said, yeah, well, you broke his arm and you broke 3 teeth. And then he says, I should have busted all of his teeth. So then you see, okay, this guy has he's a system that swings between robust states of coherence. It's either or. I'm either coherently white hat William or I'm coherently black hat William.
So I appreciate the fact that Rebohem had him listed as a narcissist, but they totally missed the sociopathy, right? Like there's a piece of sociopath that's like sitting within William. And I wondered, once I saw that clip of the younger him, if Rebohem works to cultivate and take away opportunities for that sociopath to come out in the real world, right? Like if he was in some ways directed toward Westworld. So my other question, and we can think about this, or I don't know if you all have an answer, is how old is Rebohem, right? Because Serac and William look to be contemporaries.
Right.
So I was curious as to when did this thing come online to start directing people's lives?
I thought about that too, because I think that William would have been too
old, right?
Too old, too young. And also, he's just now got the implant. So is the implant necessary for Rehoboam to actually... I guess it wouldn't be, because you can control other people in the environment. But if that's the case, they've created a very powerful person who has, like you said, sociopathic tendencies. So that's a bomb. And I think there's a lot of things around him that are very similar to Dolores. And I keep thinking back to these violent delights have violent ends. And he is violent, and he's always been violent. And now he's arguing with, pieces of himself at the same time that Dolores is arguing with pieces of herself and trying to come together with that. And so I just think it's that mirroring of it has just been really nice. And I think that if
Yes.
that is Rehoboam that sort of created this, then the man in black needs to think back a little bit more about his there's no God and there's no fate and I'm not, you know what I mean? Like he's got to think through that a little more.
And for me, it was like a sort of Mac PC thing. In other words, these were competing AI corporations because Delos didn't have anything to do with Insight. And it looks like they were both sort of developing at the same timeline, where Insight was using Rehoboam in what we call the real world, and Delos was using its software in Westworld, creating the Forge. And so now this is where Serac's trying to take over Delos. So it seems like they're contemporary time-wise. To me, that's how I kind of saw it. I also want to go back to your comment about William's sociopathy. And one of the interesting things about this idea of Rehoboam is it seems if you're going to have a culture of sociopaths or a culture that fosters sociopathy, which we do, it's hard to believe, or it's hard for people to believe that that kind of system could emerge on its own. But all you need to do is value wealth. All you need to do is have a culture in which the bottom line is wealth. Because what happens is, along the road, as you're collecting wealth, you're actually we're in an age where 1,000 people can lose their job because one person presses a button somewhere. And to have the lack of empathy, the reckless disregard for the welfare of others it takes to press that button is a selected. People are being selected by our context to be in those kind of jobs. So I would argue you don't need Rehoboam to lead a system towards sociopathy. All you need is a culture based, I'm not going to use the word greed, it just based on what I would call wealth. And
privilege. Like there's privilege around that too. Like he's in a privileged system where he has the privilege of not caring and not needing other people.
It's the very first character we met this season, the German guy living on the coast of China, right? Controlling massive assets by the press of a button, having no regard for whose life is changing because he closes this down, sells off his stock. And to the point where if you watch one of our news programs in this country where it's like based on wealth, the monetary tracking, there's a whole language out there where words like assets, I'm my vocabulary is missing right now, but the words that are in place to talk about people as if they're objects and talk about the value. How do we manipulate all these objects to maximize our individual wealth? You don't need Rehoboam. And we're kind of living in it. And I argue if we want to get to the roots of toxic masculinity, we really need to get to the roots of the sociopathy that we're sustaining with our commitment to wealth. I think once we do that, dehumanization is the game. And the more you can dehumanize, the more you can extract wealth, right? And, William had that insight at the beginning of this episode, right? He said, we're just maggots on a carcass.
Maggots on a corpse.
That's right, maggots on a corpse.
In
so
the void.
Maybe, I don't know. I got to say, I'm pretty psyched. I do think this is the beginning of the third act. And I think they've done such good work to put all these, it's not two, there's all these different duos competing with each other. And I'm really stoked to see how they work it out. And then the therapist played by Delos says, what do you think, William? Was this the inevitable end? Did your life just happen to you or did you choose it? And then he breaks through and he says, if you can't tell, doesn't matter. I mean, what I love about that moment is William has moved beyond real, right? That's been his problem the whole time. He accepts the unsolvable nature of reality, and he seems to be committing himself to a reality of now. Actually, one of you said it earlier now. He's present. And I argue, don't get mad at me for this, but he's much more like Maeve now. In the sense, Maeve's strength has always been being present and not dragging herself down with issues of reality, issues of, am I a host? Am I a human? She has she has reveled and committed herself to the lived nature of now. And of course, she's much more respectable than the man in black, but I can't see this as any accident. What do you guys think?
I'll let you have it for now.
All right, let's move on.
Nothing's accidental. Nothing is accidental. Keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. Charlotte calls her partner, tells him to stay put. She'll be there soon. Serac calls a board meeting. He knows she's the host.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, Hale? Or should I say Dolores? The real Charlotte.
Dun.
Exactly. The real Charlotte Hale would never have taken the time to check on her son. Ouch. You turned out to be kinder to your family than the person you've been imitating. Ouch.
So here's why I hated that part is it was probably true, but why is it true? It's true because of the demands on women in the workplace, right? And I want to go back to Charlotte recording that video for her son when she thought she was going to die, singing the lullaby. Like, that person was there. That tender Charlotte was there at her core.
Yes.
Again, but was totally masked. And so Serac like throws this insult at her, like, you didn't even care about your family. But like, was there space for that? I don't know.
No, the interesting thing about both of them in that argument, and most everybody in this show who has 5 lines of dialogue is ambitious. They want the world to be a certain way. Serac is extremely ambitious. Hale, Charlotte, is extremely ambitious. So even though they're going to sit there and blame each other or yell at each other about things they're doing wrong in their life, they're refusing to recognize what they do have in common, and that is they are ambitious. And the reason I say that so much is because when you want the world to be a certain way, you have to work in the world as it is to make it that way. And you have to maybe do a lot of things you would have never thought you would have done, because that's the way the world is, and you've got to move through the world the way it is to get there. Everything you said is what I heard. I also heard this is someone that's just not self-aware.
He just thinks he knows everything. Like, I think he
does. This is why I think he's a host.
Yeah. Well, no, this is why I'm hoping the season ends with Dolores victorious, right? Like, this just pulls me more and more on a team Dolores. Is he just feels like he has it all figured out with the Rebohem, and he just relies so heavily on that knowledge and that information. And I'm like, I hope you're wrong, like, just for spite, like, just to be petty, like, for no real reason.
No, I totally get it. I mean, he is the worst of white male privilege, even though they gave him a traumatized backstory. You know, like we've been talking about, it doesn't matter. He's still a jerk. And
not real trauma. Who hasn't had their city burned down?
And it's like, is this the best that corporate America has to offer, right? Is this really the best villain to be offered up? And there's a certain cartoonishness to him that if they were to tell me at the end that he was a Rehoboam probe, right, that the software is really in control and he's just been printed in a body and he's pushing everybody's buttons to get Rehoboam what it wants, not what he wants, I wouldn't be upset. Because some of the, like I said, I think I talked about this last time, some of the things he says are just so ridiculously insulting.
And his whole approach with Maeve initially, right? Like, how he was just so surface, like, of course she'll want to serve me. Like, the hubris in this guy, it's like disgusting.
Yes. When he makes that crack about her being kinder to her family than the person, you turned out to be kinder to your family than the person you've been imitating.
So mad. I was so mad when he said that. And I think it's the working mom in me right now. Like, I was like, F you for judging me as a mom trying to figure this shit out. And like, please, all these masters, like,
like, you don't make space for us to be a mom, and then you judge us you're not a mom in that space. Like, screw you.
No.
The interesting thing about that comment is that then it forces Dolores into full-blown Dolores. Mm-hmm. I mean, once he confronts her with that kind of idiocy, she goes, okay, game over. I'm taking you out. Because it turns out they did everything they needed to. She's got the gas leaking in the room. Yeah. Everybody's passing out or dying. I'm not sure. Then she pulls out her gun.
Dying.
And can I say, like, I am so sick. What, can we not learn that he's always a hologram? Like, no,
No one believes he's
don't
real.
waste your time. Just don't waste your time.
Dolores makes her escape. She fights off a whole bunch of expendable Insight crew guards with Dolores's sharpshooter skills, right? They come out, full-on killer, walks through the facility, full of intention, makes her way to the printing room. Then we go back to Dolores and talking to Maeve, having that argument. And this is where Dolores says, I can't promise you I wouldn't harm your daughter. You wouldn't trust me. And Maeve says, no, I wouldn't. And then Dolores says, if I were me, I would make sure you couldn't get allies. And then probably it's not the saddest scene. The saddest scene's at the end, but Maeve witnesses Charloris murdering Hector. And I'm going to say straight up murdering Hector because we don't experience that ball as a ball. We experience it
it's his
Hector.
consciousness.
Exactly.
Who knew they would be so tender? Like, it just...
Yeah, come on. Yeah. It's a pearl, man. It's not I don't know. I was a little surprised. That, of course, she might be very strong.
She's a host. She can...
Yeah.
She's strong.
Maeve begs Dolores to make Charloris stop. I've never seen Maeve beg.
I know.
It was rough. He dies. Maeve rages, sending the power surge through the systems. The guard enters. Charlotte grabs Connell's ball.
Heyo! Zing!
Ooh, Lordy.
Try that one again.
Charlotte grabs Connell's pearl. Seems it was the pearl driving the Dolores body in the simulation, right? Because once they destroy that pearl, Dolores dies. But interestingly enough, we don't feel that as Dolores' death as much as we felt it to be Hector's death, right? So I thought that was interesting. Charlotte continues to escape. She's cornered. She activates a transformer we saw in an earlier episode. Then you get this anime quality battle that ensues. I mean, this is right off the screen of an anime battle. Charlotte runs outside. Guards pursue. The Megabot crashes through the wall, kills the guards. Charlotte escapes. Anything other than a cool action scene? Okay.
Very sweet.
What's that?
It was very sweet because she was like rubbing the when she first meets that bot, right? So I just thought that was a good callback.
Exactly.
Right,
It was very cool. Then we're back to William. White Coat William has killed all the other Williams except White Hat William. Delos cheers him on, kills or knocks out White Hat William. We don't know if he killed him or he just knocked him out. He says, I'm free now. And Delos says, why is that, my boy? And he says, it doesn't matter what I've been, good or bad. Everything we've done has led to this. And I finally realized my purpose. I'm the good guy.
But are you? That was like...
Bring it out. I love it.
First of all, I have to say, like, it was kind of a heartbreaking scene just because, like, you see the shoe and, like, you realize that he's really, like, destroyed everything that he was. And I think there is a bit of grieving and mourning that happens when we let go of our past and our childhood. And, like, that's a process, right? And so he's kind of went through it in this very violent way, which is his nature, And so I felt like that was just a really great way to keep a theme and keep it consistent and just... I see that he's going to try to be a good guy. I want to know what his definition of a good guy is, going back to Tara's point about like intent versus impact, right? So that was my moment of the episode, just because we all do things because we think it's going to make us better. That's how we kind of justify some of the things that we do to ourselves. And I hope that he actually does. And it's not just his version of what a good guy is.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved this scene. It wasn't my favorite, but I love the fact that what we see him do is kill all of his old selves.
Because he had to. That's the way he chose to integrate them, right? Like,
and so he's not decoherent anymore, right?
No.
He's not back and forth between all these versions of himself. He's come out. I don't know if we want to call it post-traumatic growth. We'll find out later, but and then for him to come out and say, I'm the good guy, man, that's a bold writing move. What? You're the good guy?
That's narcissism. That's narcissism.
Yeah.
Like I said, good guy in what context? Like, can you come back from that?
And then right after he says, "I'm the good guy," then you hear Bernard, "Is this who we think it is?" And it just brings so much levity to the moment, right? You got Bernard and Stubbs coming in, walking in on William. And
So there's so much comedy in this series.
yes.
And I mean, that's why I was like, it's not that dark. Like, it's...
the comedy is kind of dark.
But they're much better at the comedy this season.
It's my thing. I appreciate it.
This is the season, like, we had nothing like the Battle of the Five Williams in the first two seasons, right? So I do appreciate the levity because, man, the violence loop, the hate loops, they get a little heavy.
Really quickly, it just reminded me something that I picked up on, and I don't want to like spend a lot of time on it, but did you recognize the person who lets him into the room for group therapy?
No, who was it?
It's the leader of the Confederado that he like gets on the train and everything. I wish I understood why that character to be the one who like enters him into his group therapy.
Was it just
like low key on American Gods? So
he is.
Wait.
Yes, he is.
Wait. I'm sorry, I missed.
Well, actually, no. I think what that did for us is trigger us to understand that Williams and VR, AR, right? That what you're experiencing is in Williams' quote unquote mind. It's quote unquote not really happening, whatever that means. I thought it was cool. Now, what's he doing here? But I also thought, they're just letting me know it's augmented.
You're kind of going back, right? Like we're going back to a pivotal moment that's like changed. Like he's kind of like ushering him into this moment the same way he was. So I just thought it was a cool detail, and I love that actor. So
well, there's another question I have for you guys. Why are Stubbs and Bernard in Mexico? And what I'm going to say is, are they the person that Charlotte called about having found William? In other words, is Charlotte playing both sides?
Oh, maybe.
Because she called someone and said, and then she had uploaded the data to in Mexico, and I think she called someone and said, "I found who you're looking for," but it wasn't. I don't think it was Serac she was talking to. So I just wondered, is she doing work for Serac, but she's also doing work for Dolores, playing both sides against each other so I can get back to my family and be the person I really want to be. I just got the impression she was creating confusion amongst all of them. Did you guys have an idea for why Bernard and Stubbs showed up in Mexico?
No, I just totally missed all that.
What are they doing here?
I do need to correct what I said. He is a major, and he's the one who takes the man in black and Lawrence hostage and shoots the townspeople and all of that. You know what I mean? So like he's been kind of like a guiding force in the park for the man in black through a variety of different scenarios. So just putting it out there.
Then Charlotte's getting her family on the road. Cornflower Blue Dolores digs Charlotte's family life. And I think she played both sides to buy herself time to get back to them so that they could go somewhere where they couldn't be traced. And then we have this horrible, I'm just going to call it a Darth Vader moment, and that's not meant to trivialize what happens, but the car blows up. Looks like it was organized by one of Serac's henchmen. I just assume that he was wearing that black coat. I'm not sure. And then the scorched Dolores crawls out of the vehicle. And it just, for me, it reminded me of the scene in the Star Wars series where I don't even remember the kid's name, but he falls in love. Anakin falls and comes out, gets his legs burned off or whatever. And it's that high impact moment that pushes him permanently to what we call the dark side, right? I mean, and I think Dolores... Except
Tessa Thompson is a better actor. It has a lot more, there's a lot more emotion in that, just that few seconds that you see her face. So
that whole scene, because now she's full on Team Dolores, assuming that she believes Serac did it. There's no more decoherence for her. She's been pushed to one side, and she's going to live out that side because that trauma will fuel all the coherence she needs to stay.
And I think that goes back to what Tara said about like his narcissism and like him just assuming he knows everything, because if he had been playing his cards right, he could have realized she has a vulnerability that I could exploit to get her on my side. You know what I mean? So like, why like any good chess player would have recognized that there's an opening and you should take it. And so I don't know why. I mean, other than the fact that he's just crazy and he's stupid. But like, I was actually really upset with this because this is the second child to die in this episode, and like, I feel like one minimum at least every other episode. Like, it was really hard to watch because I was rooting for them. Like, their whole situation has been sort of this backdrop of humanity and like growth and just sort of seeing what the world could be like, and this really stable, healthy character who's there for her and trusts her and is willing to work with it. It just needs a little bit, of normalcy and clarity. And they just blew it up.
Literally.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember like I pulled my hands up to my face and did like that thing. And like, Adam's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I can't believe they just killed like the best character, the best human characters in the entire show. Like,
yes.
Oh, I hated it. I mean, I get where they're going with it, but I hated it.
I for sure did the gasp, but I appreciate the fact that like now Dolores is as pissed as Maeve, right?
Yes.
So like,
how does it get
Decoherence? It should have been A Woman Scorned as the title of this episode, because that's what we left with is like, okay, it's gonna go down now.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that's going to bring in some tension because Maeve's daughter is technically still alive. And now Dolores is going to have some bitter and resentment because her son's gone. Like, there's no backup in the forge. Like,
now there's so much fantastic space to work in here. They've done such good work to make these last two episodes quite memorable. And I'm hoping the payoff is there. And can I just say, the makeup in that last scene was off the hook. I mean... Can you imagine being that actress, how long it took them to do that and to step into that makeup and to be able to play that scene?
And to add the little CGI, like, it doesn't look like CGI, but I'm assuming it is, like the fading, burning pieces on her.
Lord have mercy.
But it was really, really good. I can't, like I said, it was a heartbreaking scene, and I know that no one from Westworld's listening to this, but if I can put a shout out into the universe, just no more kids dying. Like, I can just...
There you go.
I'll just do that.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta tell you, I love sci-fi. For me, this is about as good as sci-fi gets. And any final thoughts on the episode?
No, it was amazing. It was well done.
I have to say I was surprised at how good it was. Just all the surprises I experienced while watching it.
Yeah, I felt like it was back. Like the last few have kind of been plot movers, and like you always know that those are going to happen around episode 2 or 3. And I felt like this made it worth it to put all the players where they needed to be and the emotional states that they needed to be in order for you to really have the reaction that you would have to this episode. So I just beautifully done.
Yeah. So in the About section of the Dark Loops Production YouTube channel, you can find links to papers the three of us have published regarding work we do as psychologists that relates to the themes we look for in HBO Westworld. Leandra, Tara, please tell the listeners where they can find you on social media.
This is Leandra Parris. You can find me on Twitter at Parris Leandra, at ParrisLeandra.
This is Tara Rains. You can find me on Twitter at TCRains2. That's TCRAINES, the number 2 on Twitter.
I'm Scott Jordan. You can find me on Twitter at Jordan Jam Party, JordanJamPar2I. You can find all episodes of Dark Loops Westworld on YouTube at the Dark Loops Productions channel. If you'd like to leave feedback about this podcast or episode 7 of Westworld Season 3, leave it below on this YouTube channel or send a message to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read it at the end of our next podcast. So there it is, from all of us to all of you. Big hugs, and remember, decoherence can be a sign of growth. Bye.
Bye.